visible and very clear use of force. What Sheriff Block apparently wants to see is the National Guard or a lot of police arresting people on television. He is a big believer in the power of television as a deterrent. That is to say, if you see enough people getting arrested on television for looting, he's a believer that will deter looting, and he's hoping that's some of that will come out of this.
I think the looters are big believers in the same thing. If you've noticed, they know how to use television pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have seen some arrests on television, but we've also seen some, chagrined officers just taking the handcuffs off some people and letting them go just for lack of any other thing to do at the moment. Just saying. Sorry.
Clearly, that has been LAPD's greatest frustration since this began, is their inability, simply because in many cases they were outnumbered, to be able to step in and make arrests when they see looting. And what these additional guardsmen, 4,000 more than we have now, are going to be able to do is that once I was out in the looted downtown area of Los Angeles last night and spoke to an LAPD sergeant who said, look, we can chase these guys out of these stores, but the moment we do, they come right back in. What these extra 4,000 guardsmen, 2,000 tomorrow, and then 2,000 expected tomorrow, and then another 2,000 either federal troops or California National Guard. What they'll do is that once a store's been secured, they'll be able to stay there on post and keep it secure, and the LAPD will be able to move ahead and make arrests.
Yeah, as we've seen in the last 24 hours, though, the whole theme and the whole question and the problem right now is logistics versus timing.
That's
the
right.
Timing and logistics and getting the two to marry has been so difficult over the last 24 hours.
So you might say it's been touch and go, because they touch down, they do the looting, and then they go. And catching up with them is the problem. You could have 6,000 National Guardsmen here, but the way they have been doing it, hitting and running, it's pretty doggone hard to contain them, even with any amount.
Well, the hope here is that 6,000 guardsmen, or the additional 4,000 guardsmen from what we have now, will make the difference. Obviously, it's impossible to say, and no one here at this press conference was willing to make any kind of prognostication as to how soon this is going to be over. I think everyone wants it to be over yesterday, but it hasn't happened yet, and no one's willing to predict when it will.
Josh, thank you for that. We heard just a moment ago, too, that the curfew is working. That is to say, keeping the good guys inside and off the streets. And as we say that, we can tell you that the firebombers are working. They are on the streets. Just a moment ago, just before that conference that you saw, we saw new fires at Vernon and Washington, and there was a fire just before that in the La Cienega area, so the firebombers have still been out there despite the curfew.
And David Jackson up in Sky 9 live right now perhaps can shed some more light on any new fires that he is seeing.
Pictures bear it out, David?
Yes, that's right, Tony and Jerry. And this is a unique fire, really, because we're over in the San Fernando Valley, which has not been hit by any of this until just about 40 minutes ago when this fire broke out in Panorama City. We're adjacent to Van Nuys in that area. There were actually two fires that broke out at this particular corner, two fire bombings that took place, two commercial structures that were hit. That fire has just been knocked down in the past 5 or 10 minutes by the fire department here. One of the things about the valley, of course, being that since there has been no activity here, anything that does break out is quickly jumped on by local authorities, because they are not stretched to the limit the way they are over in the other parts of Los Angeles. So this fire didn't last very long, but it did get big for a while, and it was obviously a torched firebomb job.
Can you tell us exactly where in Panorama City that is?
Jerry, I believe that we are just off Van Nuys Boulevard, actually. It's a sort of a corner of Panorama City, if the map reads correctly here. So we're almost in Van Nuys, just off Van Nuys Boulevard.
Now, the people in that neighborhood haven't known any of this kind of activity up until now. It doesn't look to me like you have too many people who have come out to try to see what's happening.
No, and that's a little bit surprising, Tony, in that the whole area is apartments and not even necessarily a commercial area. The building that was involved is commercial, but the entire rest of this area is all multi-story apartment buildings. No, there hasn't been a lot of activity out on the street, and the fire department didn't have anything to contend with in terms of vehicles either, because everybody's been adhering to the curfew and staying inside.
Thank you, David. We'll be getting back to you shortly, I would imagine. Right now, I think we have Carrie Berglund on the streets in
Koreatown. Back in Koreatown.
All right, Carrie.
Ooh.
Yeah, what we think are probably the two biggest fires burning in the greater downtown Los Angeles area. We're in Koreatown at Vermont and Washington. Right behind me, a stereo alarm cell phone store is up in flames. And And if you turn right over here, John, with me, you've got a line of fire trucks going right down Vermont past Washington. Excuse me, we'll talk to you in just a second. And another fire blazing in a furniture store just across the street and a few buildings down. The fire in that store that you're looking at now just hit the power lines overhead just seconds ago and blew out the power for this whole street. You can see residents in all the homes right here watching everything go on, having beers and waving to us. Why don't you come over here and talk to us for a second?
Oh, yeah. We'll talk to you.
What's happening here? What is your opinion of what's going on? You seem to enjoy this.
Hey, it tastes good, man. Yeah, I
it's
enjoy it.
rebellion. You know what? Because what the fuck they did is the city doesn't listen to the minorities. They try and take over the white people, try and take over us, you know. They try and talk
When
a
is
lot
the
of
madness
shit.
going to end in the streets?
It's not going to end until they put them motherfuckers. It's not going to end till then. I can tell you that right now. It's going to keep on going. What do you think this is about? I mean, come on. You think it's a fucking coincidence?
So you
and
can
all
see
this
that
shit
the...
started right now?
Yeah, okay.
We apologize for that, but of course we're looking at live television and we're looking at the emotions of people, and those people seem to me to be somewhat inebriated as they toasted what was happening there.
Okay, let's now go out to Pat Harvey in the newsroom. She's at the update desk. She has some late word for us. Pat?
Okay, Pat?
Well, thank you very much, Tawny and Jerry. Of course, you've heard about the news conference that was held just moments ago with Mayor Bradley, Sheriff Sherman Block, Police Chief Daryl Gates, and Governor Wilson, saying the 2,000 National Guard troops are already on the streets. 2 more will be mobilized for tomorrow, and there's a request for 2,000 more. Governor Wilson has says whether he will ask for federal troops depends on how quickly and how effectively the 6,000 National Guard troops can be deployed, on the streets of Los Angeles. Here are some other late developments in the Los Angeles riots. State of emergency has been declared in another Southland neighborhood, we're told. Police in Signal Hill are ordering people off the street. A curfew is in effect there in that community until tomorrow morning. The number of dead from the rioting still stands at 24. About 900 people have been reported hurt in the violence so far. There have been more than 1,300 fires set since yesterday, and dozens are still burning at this hour. At least 20 buildings are burning right now. Have a phone number I'd like to give you. If your home or business has been damaged, here's a phone number that you can call. That number is 1-800-870-1929. Now, if you live in South Central LA and you need emergency assistance, the number to call is 1-800-300-CITY. First AME Church on Harvard Boulevard has set up an emergency shelter for anyone who has been left homeless by the violence. And we have some more news for you now. The city of San Francisco is also under siege tonight as hundreds of people continue to loot stores and smash windows in that area, all in the name of Rodney King, or so they say. Police in riot gear are roaming the streets and making hundreds of arrests there. A state of emergency has been declared by San Francisco Mayor Frank Jordan, who also instituted a citywide curfew until 6 o'clock this morning. And we understand that massive crowds of people are simply making their way through downtown San Francisco, setting fires as well as looting in fashionable districts around Union Square and Nob Hill. Again, a state of emergency tonight in San Francisco. So far, we don't know if anyone has been seriously injured or killed there. I have something to tell you about that happened earlier, a demonstration. There was a protest in Berkeley over the King trial verdicts. Several hundred students from the University of California marched on the campus. Then the crowd marched to and onto the Bay Bridge. Protesters disrupted traffic on the bridge's top deck as they marched toward San Francisco. And CHP officers lined up to block the demonstrators and break up the crowd. There were no arrests in that particular incident. A number of disturbances have also been reported around other parts of the country tonight. At least 21 people were hurt in Atlanta when anger over the verdicts erupted in violence there. Now, it started out as a peaceful demonstration by university students, but it soon became a full-scale riot. Gangs of black youths broke off from the rally and rampaged through the downtown area. The rioters kicked and beat pedestrians on city sidewalks, and they then turned over cars and looted shops in that area. Police in riot gear successfully brought that disturbance there under control. Tonight, most Los Angelenos are at home watching the war in the streets from their homes, and they're hoping and praying for the best there. But for the past 24 hours, the information that you have received has come from reporters trying to capture the chaos. We have one such report from our Matt Stevens. Are we ready to go to that now? We do not have that report at this time. So with that, that's it. That's the latest from the update desk, and we now go back to Jerry and Tani.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you
As
very
you
much.
heard from City Hall just a little while ago, state, city, and county officials seem to think this evening that with the forces they're bringing into play, the resources they're calling upon, that they will be able to contain the situation. As they are containing it somewhat, we heard the number of arrests that were made today, and they intend to have more National Guardsmen on duty tomorrow. For our safety. They're convinced that the curfew is working, and for all intents and purposes, I suppose you could say it is, despite the fact new fires have been breaking out since the curfew has been put in place.
And of course, one thing that Chief Gates had said was that he, of course, had hoped that today the whole situation would be under control. Now he is projecting that that will happen tomorrow. And then he said even if it takes 3 days, which if we get control of this tomorrow, it will be 3 days. That is 2 days less than it took to regain control during the Watts riots back in 1965. And of course, he said that this whole situation is far more dramatic and wider in scope than the Watts riots had been.
And the number of dead is growing, as we heard, despite the fact the curfew, despite the fact we've got better police protection now, and all, the number of dead has increased to 24. Of course, the verdict in the Rodney King case is being blamed for the 24 hours of rioting. Earlier today, our Kerry Kilbride and